Good morning. I'd like to welcome all of you. I'm here to officially welcome you to the third annual Fire Safety Technology Forum on behalf of the Minister of Interior and UAE Civil Defense. The forum is being held under the patronage of His Royal Highness Lieutenant General Sheikh Saif bin Zayed Al Nahyan, UAE Minister of Interior and Deputy Prime Minister, in an effort to enhance the advances of fire safety planning for a fire region. UAE Civil Defense has designed this platform for you today. In its third successful year, the event will feature renowned fire safety experts as well as government agencies and authorities to share their experiences in preventing fire in commercial, industrial, and residential areas. Some of you may have attended one or both of the previous forums, and you are certainly aware of how successful both events have been in addressing issues across the region and providing a platform for enhancing communication. We all hope that current forum will continue this trend and will experience thought-provoking presentations and lively exchanges over the day and the next few hours. Regardless of the cost of loss of implications, only one fire is enough to expect. Regardless of the cost of the loss of implications, only one fire is enough to affect and structural integrity of many families and loyalty of the entire workforce. From here arises the importance of such events and the need to increase the awareness regarding fire hazards and how to assess the risk of fire safety in your surroundings. So, we will cover three main topics during this conference. First, radiation. Second, latest technologies in fire safety and how they support civil defense. And major incidences, third, in major incidental management. I would like to now welcome our first speaker of our day, who is our keynote speaker, who flew all the way to the UAE for us from the UK, especially for this forum. Mr. Peter Holland is an advisor to Government Department for Communities and Local Government. He provides professional advice and support to senior officials and ministers on a range of matters, including fire policy, national resilience, fire safety, and inspection of Crown premises. Peter also provides advice and support to the government in the event of any national emergencies. Peter joins the Department for the Communities and Local Government following a career in fire and rescue spanning for more than 40 years. Mr. Holland, or shall we say Peter, is going to discuss for us a modern approach to fire safety. So without any further delay, please put your hands together and help us welcome our first keynote speaker of the day, Mr. Peter Holland. Welcome, sir.
Your Highness, Major General, fellow guests, colleagues, it's a great pleasure to be back here in the Emirates. It's my first time in Abu Dhabi, but I have been to Dubai before. In fact, the previous fire and rescue service that I was Chief Fire Officer actually trained some of the staff in the Dubai Civil Defence, and I know how proud we are in the UK that we've helped assist you to develop into what is a fantastic organisation with the Civil Defence here in the Emirates. I'm just disappointed that you couldn't have laid a Grand Prix on. Staying in such a fantastic hotel, I really would have liked to have seen the racing cars travelling past whilst we were staying here, but no matter. So let's see if we can get the technology to work. One of the things I'm going to be talking about is sharing. And I sit on the board of the NFPA. I'm chairman of the Institution of Fire Engineers, and I hope you all recognise that both those organisations are global organisations and are very keen to share information around the world in relation to fires, and that's a key theme of what I'm going to be talking about this morning. It's already been mentioned, despite the fact I know I only look about 40 years of age, I've actually been in the fire service for 40 years, and I'm very proud of that, and I'm very proud of the way that service has developed. And there is no truth in the rumour that I used to be responsible for looking after the horses that pull the fire engines out. I don't go back that long. So, I've entitled this The Building Life Cycle, but really it's a building that's had a fire life cycle. And I think this really encapsulates what we need to do as people involved in fire, because I'm conscious there are people from the fire protection world, from the insurance world, from the fire service here today. And I think hopefully you'll gather a bit of a picture as I talk through this slide. Clearly buildings are designed and they're built and they're occupied. Hopefully that they're designed and built to good standards. Better now, of course, than they used to be. And then the fire happens. And as you move round the arrow there to the bottom, this, I think, is a key part of where we currently get things wrong, and we don't put enough emphasis into what we should be doing, and that's local fire services around the world I'm being critical of, including my own in the UK. The amount of time and effort that is spent on investigation of fires is not enough. We need to be spending time analysing the fire, not just the cause of the fire. And most fire investigations done by fire service, fire departments around the world are very much focused on the cause of the fire and need to be focusing more on analysing the circumstances around that fire. And then having done that, to learn the lessons both locally within the individual service, but also to share that within your country and then globally. And how delighted I was to hear that these presentations are going to be streamed globally, they're going to be on YouTube, because it is important that people pick up these messages and do learn. But sadly, we don't learn the lessons. We really don't, and hence my being so critical of the way we do things. Because if we were to move around that oval that you see before you, you would start looking at saying, well, if we can gather evidence through the lessons learnt, we can review the standards, the testing regimes, and the operational procedures from a fire service point of view to improve the way and ensure we have a better outcome as we move on to building new buildings in the future and looking at our fire service practices, our operational procedures. I'm going to talk about a couple of case studies, and these are lessons from two serious high-rise building fires in the UK. I apologise for the use of the term high-rise because when I look at the high-rise buildings you have here in the Middle East, ours pale into insignificance. They're much lower, much smaller. But the buildings I'm talking about, one is a 14-storey building and one is a 12-storey building. The first one is where two firefighters sadly died tackling the fire, and that was in Southampton in the south of England. And the other fire was in London, a building called Lakanal House. Some of you will be aware of this fire, where tragically 6 of the occupants died in that fire. The first one I'm talking about is the fire in Southampton. This was a 14-storey building, and we've learned the lessons from both of the fires I'm going to talk around. This first one, there were very poor firefighting techniques employed at this fire, which is why 2 firefighters tragically lost their lives. Their searching techniques, the way that they actually ventilated, they opened the flat up, they ventilated it, they didn't take thermal image cameras in with them, and the fire flashed over. When it flashed over, the cables on the ceiling dropped down, so when the crews who were in there tried to escape, they were tangled in the cabling, so couldn't get out. So there's an issue from a building regulations point of view about cabling being fixed and fixed with fire-resistant materials. Whilst they were fighting the fire, this building had an unusual design. For example, flat 72 was on the 9th floor. Now, who would have thought flat 72 would be on the 9th floor? There was very poor signage in the building, and there were no sprinklers in the building. We have lots of buildings like that in the UK. If they were built today, they would require sprinklers. Move on to the second fire, and this was the Lakanal House fire in London, where 6 people tragically died on a hot, yes, we do get occasionally hot days in the UK, but very unusual fire spread occurred at this building. The fire actually spread downwards. Now, most of you all know, I hope you all know that fire normally spreads upwards, but on this occasion, the burning debris falling out of the flat. The windows were open on the lower floors, no air conditioning in this building. The curtains were flapping, and the burning debris ignited the curtains on the 3rd floor. So you've now got a flat fire on the 3rd floor below where the firefighters are tackling the fire up on the 9th floor. So they had to move their bridgehead down to below the fire floor. That's the procedures, and quite right too. But of course, on a hot day, you've now got firefighters who are having to travel up that staircase through 8 flights of stairs, hot conditions, carrying breathing apparatus sets, very hard work. And whilst you've got people trapped in this building, so very serious fire. To compound matters, the lift, or elevator if you prefer, had failed, so they weren't able to transport the kit up the lift. And probably most critical of all, the fire protection in this building completely failed. The theory in most of our high-rise buildings is the compartmentation, the fire resistance. It should be a fire-resisting box, effectively, so the fire should not get out of each individual flat. Yet this fire, not only had it spread downwards, it was also spreading laterally into the adjoining flats. And that was because, whilst it was built to the right standard, over the years, people had gone in, they'd changed the heating and ventilation systems and hadn't put fire stopping in where those systems had been taken out. So the fire just spread throughout that building. So the operational commander had no idea where this fire was spreading to. He was expecting it to just stay in the one flat, and suddenly it's spreading laterally, and it's also spreading downwards. So very difficult fire to tackle. Okay, so that's what I've just covered on that previous slide there. So, okay, but again, the final point there, like in the other building, actually, there was no fire alarm other than individual alarms in the flats, and no sprinklers. And again, it would have required sprinklers if it was a new build. So, this is UK. There is a duty upon the coroners, the people who investigate the cause of people dying. And under their coroner's rules, happens to be Rule 43, the coroner has a duty, and this is about the lessons learned, and that's why we've learnt so much about those 2 fires. The coroner has a duty to write a letter to persons of influence to avoid a repeat occurrence of that. And on both of those occasions, they wrote to government, the Fire and Rescue Service directly, and to housing providers with the lessons that needed to be learnt from both those fires. Now, we shouldn't have to be relying on the coroner telling us how we should improve things. We should be doing that ourselves. We should be taking it upon ourselves to investigate, analyse, and feed those lessons in. So to move on, new methods of construction, modern methods of construction, as most people like to call them. I think we would all accept, at least I hope we would all accept, that's posing a huge challenge globally, a huge challenge. People talk glibly about our buildings needing to be sustainable. And some of the sustainable buildings that are being built, I mean, clearly when a fire burns and the building burns down, that's hardly a sustainable building. You know that as well as I do. But the materials that are being used are sustainable. That's where the terminology comes from. But it's posing a massive challenge to us in the fire service as to how we deal with those fires when they occur. I think probably the best example, and I understand you've had a fire here in the Emirates might be in the last few days, but fairly recently, where a large building under construction, where these insulated sandwich panels, either of polystyrene or polyurethane, are used. And yes, they've improved them from the problems of 10 or 12 years ago, but they still burn very, very quickly. I went along to a fire test in my former service in Bedfordshire, about 50 kilometres north of London, to witness this fire test. And it was about the size of, say, 8 metres square, constructed completely of insulated 100mm polyurethane sandwich panels with a silica sand, non-combustible floor with a crib in the corner. And I looked at this construction. It had been beautifully built to the best standards, and I looked at it and I thought, this isn't going to be a very exciting fire test at all. I just couldn't see how this fire was going to get out of hand. 6 minutes into it, I'm starting to get bored. Nothing's happening. Suddenly, at the 7th minute, the panel started to delaminate, the flames got into the core, and suddenly we were running. Within 90 seconds of that happening, we were running. This thing flashed over, and at that point I thought, we've really got to do something about this. Yet, at that time, it was passing the tests. The tests that were in existence, which was a corner test with a crib, but this one had a ceiling on it, which I should have mentioned, had a ceiling on it. Suddenly, it behaved quite differently. And we were witnessing in the fire service that fires were behaving quite differently from the way that they were performing in the test. So they changed the test, and this was in Europe, to a corner test, but they put a ceiling on it. And suddenly it was replicating what was happening in the real world, the one I live in, and the fires that we were going to. So it's about learning those lessons, but learning them quickly, because methods of construction are changing all the time. So if we don't gather the lessons quickly enough and feed them into the testing regimes, we're going to have more examples like the sandwich panels. At the Building Research Establishment in the UK, good friend of mine, Martin Shipp, who some of you will know, who's done lots of major investigations, he showed me around some of the new buildings that they have on test. And some people are actually considering using paraffin wax on the linings of walls. Apparently it works very well from an insulation, a transfer of heat perspective. But let me guess, and you'll know, paraffin wax is not going to behave very well in a fire. So God help us if things like that start to get on the market and get round tests and we end up having to deal with them. So absolutely we do need to keep up to speed. And if you want to just capture that for a moment, but those are the issues, I think, that we need to focus on. And as I say at the end, and that's why I absolutely applaud you, not only for putting this conference on, but for sharing it globally, because it is a huge challenge globally. So I go back to that point I was making originally about analysis and sharing of data, and that need for more detailed investigation and analysis of incidents. And when we're doing that, yes, we need to look at the structure and how that behaves, but we also need to look at the content, how they are behaving. As modern materials are being used inside our homes, our buildings, we need to gather that information more quickly. And we need to gather it not just from the tragedies, not just from the big fires, but we need to gather it from the smaller fires. And I think, from my point of view, that's where I come in as the government's fire advisor. We're just looking and reviewing our incident recording system in the UK, and I'm insisting that we pose questions to each of the incident commanders, even at the smaller fires, and ask them the question, did the structure behave as you would have expected? Did the contents behave as you would have expected? And also actually about how the people behaved, but that's perhaps for another day. But I think what we will get out of that is that individual services will improve the knowledge of their firefighters. Because if they say, well, the structure behaved in a way that I'd not seen before, somebody within that service would follow that through and check out and say, well, actually, you might not have seen it before, but that's how this type of structure behaves. So that's a good learning lesson for that incident commander for the future, which you can share around the service. If, though, he'd come across sandwich panels 12 years ago at an early stage and said, this fire suddenly started spreading very, very quickly and unusually, and they hadn't seen it before, that then would provide a trigger for that service to then feed into, in the UK's case, the Building Research Establishment, to come along and do a more detailed and thorough analysis of how that structure behaved. But that all needs to be done very quickly whilst the building is still there, if it's a smaller fire, before any demolition or structural alterations are made. And as I stress, and I can't stress it enough, this point about not only doing this in our own countries, but also globally. And I think that is the biggest challenge and the message that I wanted to get through. So it is about collation of that information and reviewing it so that we improve our test standards and we improve our building regulations, our building codes to ensure that they are fit for purpose for the future. But this will only happen if the evidence is strong enough. Because I know, as somebody who battled trying to get sprinklers into single-storey retail premises after we'd had 1 or 2 incidents, we really struggled to get the information, get the data from around the service in the UK to prove that we needed to have sprinklers. And the people sat in central government, which is where I sit now, were saying, no, we need evidence. We absolutely need more evidence. You're not giving it to us. So we need to do that. But actually, when we're gathering that information, I'm sure that if we'd have been able to go around the world, metaphorically speaking, to get that data, it could have been provided from the United States, here in the Middle East, Australia, New Zealand, and so on. So I want to talk about a little bit about what we're doing in the UK, because I think this provides, like I said on the screen, a good model. And it was actually interestingly mentioned right at the beginning, at the opening. We would say in England prevention is better than cure. I think the interpreter put it across slightly different to that, but in principle it's the same thing. The best outcome is that no fire occurs. So if you can prevent it through education and people being vigilant, that is undoubtedly the best outcome. The protection element of it, alarms, fire resistance, escape routes, very important. Now the next bit, the response bit, I think a lot of you might be surprised to see sprinklers there rather than in the protection part. And I've been a bit mischievous in doing that. But it's making the point that sprinklers or water mist, Nick, who's speaking later, is very keen that I mentioned water mist in this presentation because that technology is moving very rapidly and certainly where you've got water problems potentially really useful to us. But let's talk about sprinklers for a moment. It is like having a firefighter in every room 24/7. With the fastest response from the fire department that you can have, an awful lot of people are dead before we actually ever get the call. So it's really important that a response is made, and the only way you're going to get anything tackled on that fire, with the exception of somebody trained to use a fire extinguisher, is by having a sprinkler in those rooms. And of course, the other bit of the emergency response, ourselves, the fire department, fire and rescue service. So I want to briefly take you through a tale of 2 fires. If I can get it on the screen. These 2 fires occurred in 2009. Actually, both those previous fires I spoke about also occurred in 2009. So the tale of 2 fires. Hopefully you've just had a chance to have a look at the screen there. So both these fires occurred in 2009. One in a freight company, unsprinkled, and one in a vehicle airbag manufacturer, which was sprinkled. And I think it's important to share this information with you. Okay. So you can see the freight company identified that building, the L-shaped building, if you like. Interestingly, the building with the blue roof at the top of the screen, that burnt down 12 months before the fire in the freight company. So the fire started on the top side of the building there. And as you can see from the screen, the area marked in red was where the fire spread to, and the shaded area in grey on the left-hand side of the screen is where the smoke damage occurred and water damage from the firefighting jets. So a serious fire, badly damaging the building. You can see on the screen there just how badly damaged the building was. So you can see just how badly damaged it was. I mean, a serious fire. You see what's left of the carnage, the forklift trucks still left in the building. There we go. Now, this company was an inbound, outbound storage freight business. It was a 24-hour business. They had some of the vehicles were parked up ready to go the following morning, and thankfully they weren't damaged, so they got on the way. But they still had inbound freight coming from all over Europe and needed to find premises very quickly, which they duly did. A friend of the local owner lent him some warehouse facilities, and duly they managed to get that into storage. But it was an additional financial burden on top of the building that they own. They were having to then pay rental on that building. And they weren't fully insured. How many companies do you know carry full business continuity insurance? Most of them you will find post-fire will tell you they did not have enough insurance. So the numbers. Now I put it in dirhams. I did the calculation last night, so I think I got it at the current exchange rate. So if you want to look down the right-hand side for those of you in dirhams, and the left-hand side those of you who are in pounds sterling. But if you look at the numbers there, the bottom number on the right-hand side there, 11 million dirham loss. A serious financial loss. So hopefully, I'm sure I'll be preaching to the converted here, but there will be some people who perhaps haven't seen the dramatic benefits that sprinklers can bring. And the answer to this question is clearly yes, as you will see in the slide. Now this, interestingly, is a factory and warehouse. It's producing yarn for vehicle airbags. And it is right in the middle of a rural area, as you can see. So fire department response times, probably 15 minutes, something like that. So if ever a building needed sprinklers, this one did. And I'm sure that's why the insurance company insisted on it having sprinklers. So it was an arson attack, and it was an arson attack where there were two seats of fire. Actually, not too far apart, but that's where the arsonists did their business. And you can see the at-risk building is enormous. If that fire had spread uncontrolled, that would have taken out all of that building that you can see on the screen there. But actually what happened, if you can just see the two red dots at the bottom, that's, as you saw from the arrows, that's where the fires were started, and then you've got a little bit of grey area where some smoke damage was done. Now, you can see you've got wooden pallets there. Those of you in the fire service know, well, hopefully you'll all recognise that wooden pallets burn very, very easily. The fire's not even spread and taken those wooden pallets out. You might just be able to make out, hopefully, running down the screen from the top right towards the middle, the sprinkler pipe work there, but you can see not a lot of damage has been created there. They threw a brick through this window and started the fire through the window, and that's where the yarn is, as you'll see in a second. The reason it collapsed is the water going from the sprinkler head caused it to collapse, but very little damage, as you can see. Now, this is an interesting picture because that roller shutter door is a fire-resisting roller shutter door, and it was open. It was open during the fire. It should have been closed. It should have operated, the fusible link should have operated, and it should have dropped down. So had that been unsprinkled, that fire would have undoubtedly come out and spread to that factory, the whole of that building that you saw on the screen there. So, I really like to do this when you've got sprinkler buildings, is trying to capture the numbers, the financial loss, what was at risk, if you like. So let's call it the potential loss. 83.4 million dirham. That was what was at risk if that building had been totally destroyed, which would have happened had it not been sprinkled. 15-minute response time from the fire service, rural area. The loss, 1.95 million dirham. You can do the maths like I can, so you've got an $81.5 million dirham saving. And I think that's really important when you're marketing sprinklers to start looking at those sorts of numbers to help do that. No productivity loss, confidence of crucial clients, no water course contamination, very little air pollution from the fire, and no unemployment caused as a result. And that's the managing director's words, they're not my words. The company had been in existence doing yarn, not for vehicle airbags obviously, but we're doing yarn prior to that, and that's his quotation. I think that's a really powerful quotation. Thank you very much indeed for listening for me, and I look forward to chatting to you later. Thank you.